We'll be doing an overview of Chapter 6, Qualitative Process Analysis from the Fundamentals of Business Process Management. A little bit about myself. My name is Mike Dahlgren. I'm a graduate student pursuing a master's in information systems, and I'm also an accounting manager at a transportation company. For the qualitative process analysis overview, I'll be covering value-added analysis, and the reverse of that, waste analysis, stakeholder analysis and issue documentation, Pareto analysis, and pick charts, as well as root cause analysis and a conclusion to recap everything. Start out with value added analysis. Uh, it is a technique used to identify unnecessary steps in a process and views of eliminating them. So these are tests, and typically they're documented similar to standard operating procedures. And there is value adding, um, business value adding, and non-value adding um, steps within a process. And value adding would be essentially providing value or providing a benefit in a step of a process. An example would be a technician diagnosing a dishwasher, essentially finding what the issue is with it. Business value adding, which is making a process within the business more efficient. And then non-value adding, which would be neither value adding or business value. An example of value added analysis would be the steps listed here, as well as the performer and the classification is one of the three. So the first step would be filling out the request. This is done by the site engineer, and that is a evaluating process. The next step would be sending the request to the clerk, but this essentially does not provide any value to the process. So this is a non-value adding step. And then lastly is an example for a business value adding, creating a PO, which is done by the clerk. Now, the reverse of value adding analysis would be waste analysis. So an example of this would be the Toyota production system and looking at ways to make everything as efficient as possible and eliminating waste where necessary. And there are 7 types of waste with 3 main categories. Those categories are move, hold, and overdue. And the subcategories, starting with move, are transportation and motion. With hold, it's inventory and waiting. And overdue is defects, overprocessing, and overproduction. Starting with the first category, move, one of the subcategories is transportation. And this could be an example would be physically transporting materials, or electronically exchanging documents. So essentially, like 2 parties are handing off uh, information or details, um, and process models with lanes and pools can help classify waste, similar to the graph on the right. And then another subcategory is motion, where participants are moving one place to another with a process while it's being executed. An example would be within manufacturing, where workers are moving product from one line to another on a production line. Another digital example would be having a person complete a task within applications, and then automation could be an option here. And one example from in my accounting experience where automation could be helpful or key would be using tools like Alteryx or Power BI, um, or RPA, which would be robotic process automation, and using those instead of having someone click around and complete a task. So that may take 40 to 60 minutes when the automation can complete that within a couple minutes. The other main category of waste analysis is hold. Um, A subcategory would be inventory. And in manufacturing, a form of waste is when a product is in a work in process for an extended period of time. An example of this would be when a product fails an inspection. The product must go through the whole process again, thus creating being in work in progress for twice the amount of time needed. And the more errors, the more time that product is in work in process. And also waiting is another subcategory. And in manufacturing, unfinished products that are moved production lines and are waiting for production workers to be in processing on the new production line. And then there's also idleness, where the worker is essentially waiting for the product, which would be the reverse of the waiting situation. The third and final category of waste analysis is overdue. Um, and one of the subcategories is defect. Uh, so essentially, when the work done to correct, repair, or compensate in a process, which would include rework, which would be repeating a process to fix a defect the first time a task is completed. There's also overprocessing. Work is performed unnecessarily to perfectionism. An example would be measuring a car's emissions very accurately, but ultimately, if it was accurate or not, uh, the emissions are so far over the threshold that there's a big margin, then that car would either pass or fail the test, regardless if it's more accurate. And then also overproduction, which occurs when the entire process is executed, but does not provide value upon completion. An example of this would be a requested trip is canceled by a customer, and since it was canceled, it doesn't create any value for the worker at that company. Now moving on to stakeholder analysis and issue documentation. For stakeholder analysis, is essential to understand who has interest in the project and could therefore contribute to, affect, or be affected by the project's execution. For some examples, like in a business project management category, um, some of the stakeholders would be customers, process participants, external parties, process owners, or process sponsors. And it is also essential to document these issues and understand the multiple stakeholders' perspectives to understand what they would want the outcome to be. And you'd consider both quantitative and qualitative impacts of each of those outcomes. For Pareto analysis, essentially it identifies which issues or what causal factors of an issue uh, should be given priority. And typically, a small subset of issues is likely to be responsible for the largest impact. And you can see on the right here, essentially the slow approval, that column makes up the majority of the issues, like 78%, and the other two to the right do make up some of it, but really it's and ultimately, like, you don't have 50 different issues. It's typically it's easy, and it's also easy to see it within this chart, what's the leading cause. And then there's also pick charts, and pick stands for possible, implement, challenge, and kill. Um, and pick charts complement Pareto charts and are used to organize and prioritize ideas based on impact and their ease of implementation. And you can see on the right here, essentially like how that would work. And on the x-axis, you have difficulty, and on the y-axis, you have payoff. So you can make a determination on whether it should be implemented, or you should stop that project. For root cause analysis, there's cause and effect diagrams which depict the relationship between a negative effect and its possible causes. There's also the six M's that are considered. which are machine, method, material, man, measurement, and milieu. Uh, Primary and secondary factors may also be relevant to those for the cause and effect. And on the left, you can see the 6 M's and then also primary and then secondary factors linked into the issue, which is that solid area and a solid arrow that's blue, and then the issues on the right. And then why diagrams, which is a technique used to brainstorm sessions for root cause analysis. You began with an issue and ask questions that can what could be contributing factors of that issue. And then you repeat that process on those contributing factors. Um, and you can see on the left, that's sort of the diagram that it would look like. You have the issue and then branching off contributing factors and explaining like the why, what, how of those. To recap everything, we covered value added analysis, essentially determining whether a step in a process is value added, business value added, or non value added. We also took a look at waste analysis and the different parts and components that make that up, um, to essentially eliminate processes and what I guess what determined to be leading cause of that. And then also stakeholder analysis and issue documentation, understanding the stakeholders, and then also their perspectives and what they would like their outcomes to be. We also took a look at Pareto charts and pick charts, um, essentially to determine what's the leading cause of some of the uh, issues in a process, or determine if a project should be if it's possible, if it would be a challenge, if it should be implemented, or if the project should be killed. And then we also took a look at root cause analysis diagrams, as well as why diagrams. And yeah, thank you for listening.